I'll be honest, I don't usually make videos like this, but I have a bit of free time ever since I quit Throne of Liberty. One of the nice things about being a content creator is that I can get access to games early, and most of the time it's a game I'm very excited about and already planning on playing, but in this case it was a game that I was actually not too interested in originally. All of the gameplay I saw of it beforehand just seemed very clunky, and it's just a cliche at this point that every survival game out there has shit combat. And then when you combine that clunky combat with full loot survival mechanics or just punishing death mechanics in general, you just get a very niche experience that not a lot of people enjoy, including me. This game, on the other hand, has a very happy medium on that, I'd say. And it kind of just checks all my boxes with what I'm looking for, which is a modern survival game with decent combat and a mix of MMO features. The combat starts off pretty slow in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, but once you get access to proper gear and all three of your skills, it does get much more fast-paced, and with fast-paced, more skill-based too. I mean, just right off the bat for my New World, Throne of Liberty, Dark Souls viewers, the dodges are iframes, and you can pick between a heavy and light equipment load, which affects your stamina usage, your mobility, and just changes your entire playstyle basically. Essentially what I'm saying is, if you played any of those games or any game like that, this is going to feel like home to you. On top of that, you have a variety of different ranged weapons to choose from obviously, but there's a bunch of interesting skills to synergize with those weapons too. And you have a lot of choice there, You have 3 skills, 3 techniques, which are basically giant passives, and you can equip and take any of them from any class that you want. You're not limited to just one class. And that includes normal passives too, which have no limit besides your skill point pool. Just for example here, I mained Bene Gesserit, which was the voice thing, and it's kind of like a CC bot. And then I also took the grappling hook and the range damage passives from the soldier class. And then on top of that, I also got stronger shields and regeneration from the technician class. So there's a lot of playing around you can do with. It really depends what the level cap is during release. But at the end of the day, the build variety is definitely going to be insane. The best way I can describe it is there's something for everyone. You want to be a tanky melee player, you can build for it with heavy armor and soldier passes. You want to be a high damage melee assassin, you can go for it with light armor and more movement damage based abilities. There's literally a stealth or a skill that gives you like speed hacks and you run across the map. Same with the sniper, you can just sit in the back line and use long range abilities like a hunter seeker drone and run away easily whenever you want. The best part of it is you can actually respec all of this for free. It's not some cash shop shit, it's not some gated cost at like end game. In beta it was only a 24 or 48 hour CD, but I'm hoping it's going to be at least 24 hours on release, maybe even less. I'm a big fan of respecing, especially in the beginning. Maybe in the beginning they just let us all respec as much as we want as we're learning all these new skills. A lot of stuff does have to be tested. Maybe they're going to update the descriptions later on, but me and my buddy literally just went and used skills on each other in the PvP area to understand how it works. But just I'm going on a tangent here. There's just a lot of synergy with some of these skills. I couldn't really find a skill where, let's say, only melee players will use it while all range players will ignore it, or vice versa. Teleporting behind people, not locking them in place, stealth, grappling hook, etc. These are all skills that I feel like would be great to use regardless of your build. Like, it's going to be mainly based on fun factor and what you deem is like a deal breaker for you. The melee combat especially has a lot of depth and potential. I'm saying potential because while it's certainly better than the old system they had, it definitely needs a bit of work, which I'm assuming they're working on with this delay. But still, as of now, you have light and heavy attacks, you have parries and perfect parries, and of course you can dodge. And all of that synergizes with skills and shields and specific movement equipment like being able to fly or gap close. The foundation is definitely there. I really feel like the animations and hit effects are what's really holding it back right now. Using melee weapons is very fun, but as soon as you're hitting an NPC or even a player 8 times in a row in a CC lock, you see the obvious issues with it. In terms of MMO-esque features, that actually ended up being my main surprise with the game. You can make a guild, you can make parties, you can all build a giant base together, you can PvE together and get instanced loot. That's all expected, of course. But on top of that, there are these social hubs in the game where you can go trade on the market, pick up quests, pay your taxes, etc. Closest thing I can get to describe it is the tower in Destiny 2, basically, just a little more advanced. In terms of PvP, I did have trouble finding any during this beta, so me and my buddy just did duels in the PvP area instead. Like, there's definitely some clunkiness and balance issues here, but for a survival game, I'd say it's pretty decent, especially if they keep improving it. The genre isn't exactly known for its combat, you know, which is probably why survival games come and go like BR games at this point. The PvP mechanics are very much more so MMO-ish than survival based. You don't drop anything when you die, such as your gear or important items. Pretty much the only thing you drop is spice and looted currency that you didn't store. There are certain weeks though where a certain part of the desert is full loot PvP, for those a fan of that, where you will drop everything when you die. But the nice thing about that is it's optional, and if you're not a fan of it, you can just not PvP that week and wait for next week, just prepare, or go into the other non-full loot PvP areas. This doesn't even follow the no-life survival game cliche where every wipe you go in with a spreadsheet and play like 30 hours a day just to build a base, get gear, top weapons, and in general just get ahead of others. The only thing you lose every week in the PvP area is your temporary base that you build there. Your gear, your loot, everything you can think of can be transported into your PvE base before the weekly wipe, assuming you can safely transport it out, of course. You don't even have to build a base in the PvP area if you don't want to. You can literally just build in the PvE area right next to it and just walk into PvP with nothing holding you back. And I'm a huge fan of that, honestly. It's a very casual approach to the very sweaty survival game landscape. Literally, my favorite part of every survival PvP game is finishing all the progression and grind mechanics and just walking around with a maxed out build looking for PvP against other maxed out players. And this is the perfect game for that, for what I'm seeing. That's literally all I did during the beta, and for the last 10 days, you know, I've been having a blast. Of course, every game has issues, with this being a game that people are pre-ordering and spending their time and money on. I feel like I should definitely voice some of these concerns. The main ones for me are definitely going to be PvP balance and just combat fluidity in general. Right off the bat, when I did PvP, I could tell there was a clash between survival game and PvP combat mechanics. And the survival game combat aspects are definitely overpowering it right now. I could very much see a meta where someone just puts on 5 shotguns on their hotbar to avoid reloading and just CC locks people to death. I'm not too big of a fan on that, and I know a lot of people aren't too. I know some people are, but I would much rather they lean more into the MMO aspect of the game in that regard, and just let you pick maybe 1 or 2 main weapons, a pistol, and the melee weapon. That's it. When you give people too much freedom with equipment on their hotbar, you end up with a very clunky foundation that also isn't accessible to new players, and then whenever you remove that later on in the game, like after a month or 2, it fucks over the veteran players too. So I think it's better to start off with the good system and refine it over time rather than release it bad, then make it good and piss off all the players that relied on it being bad. You get what I'm saying? V Rising is actually a really good example on that. The PvP in that game is really fun when you're a regular player fighting other regular players with 1 or 2 weapons, but then you fight someone with 8 weapons on their hotbar that has been doing nothing but duels for the past 3 years for some reason, and each weapon has unique skills and certain synergies. It just becomes too much, and like 90% of the time it's very clunky to both look at and experience. And V Rising has kind of shot themselves in the foot there because they can't remove that system because they have a very loyal small but very loyal player base that relies and loves that system because of the skill gap of it. So if they remove that, they're essentially killing their game because that small loyal player base are the only people that play their game right now. It also just kind of starts feeling like a chore with the system, because you feel like you can only go out and PvP if you have a full hotbar of weapons ready. And since everyone else is doing it, you feel like you have to in order to compete with them. And then every time you die, your repair cost is just astronomical because of all these weapons breaking down. And then there's also the inconvenience of constantly having to open your inventory to eat food or use a tool, because there's no room on your hotbar to do that. You want to be constantly PvP ready. And listen, I know it's a choice you make to do that, and it's like a sacrifice, but it's one of those small things that make a big impact indirectly on people's enjoyment of the game. I just feel like the game would be much smoother and more accessible with a main loadout system that MMOs use, where your hotbar is more of a food, utility, bandage area, and your weapons are all stored in a loadout. Like, come on guys, the year is 2025 and we still have never seen a PvP survival game with a lot of combat, good graphics, and most importantly, smooth and clean PvP. It's always the combat that takes the shitter in these. And of course optimization too, but that's a whole nother story. But what I'm saying is, this has the potential to be an outlier in the survival game genre, as long as they refine the combat or do like a foundation revamp of it. I'm really hoping this isn't just going to be another 1 month survival game. Content is a given at this point. Every survival game has hundreds of hours of content, and this game is not going to be an outlier in that. It definitely has a lot of content that's coming on the base version release date, and a lot coming soon, you know, and they're already talking about expansions with other planets, other biomes. The potential is big there. At the end of the day, combat that both looks and feels smooth matters much more than potential balance issues and loss of skill ceiling. I understand they want to make the combat fit the Dune universe and laws of that, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say only a very small, vocal minority of people care about that. I would very much rather play a Dune game that breaks the lore by having amazing combat than play a dead Dune game that follows Dune lore but just has bad combat. And it's not even that black and white, you know. There are definitely ways to make the combat still match the Dune universe and follow all its laws, but being much smoother than what we have right now. And just a side note too, the base building is very nice. Lots of freedom and alternate pieces. You can go all out for your PvE base. In my case, I actually ended up making a sort of blockade on a major road with my buddy. And the best part about it is I had all these plants nearby that I could just sap all the water from and store. So I basically never had water problems. I'm really happy the thirst mechanic isn't that extreme, to be honest. I saw some YouTube videos where someone was saying it's gonna like kill the game for 90% of people, and I'm glad they took a more casual approach to that. Basically, you can just stockpile a bunch of water in your base, and you can even turn the blood of NPCs, which you can easily kill there everywhere, and turn that into water over time. You can also craft from your storage, you know, just like if you want to craft a weapon or something, it takes it from your storage. You don't have to go out and individually get each ingredient. People still fucking release survival games these days that doesn't have that mechanic. Like 90% of the time you're doing base inventory management, and I hate that. So it has all those modern stuff. What else? You can auto deposit similar items. You can make base blueprints and store them. It has all these modern base building and quality of life mechanics that every survival game in 2025 should have by now at this point. I got nothing bad to say about the entire base building and immersion part even. But yeah, all in all, I'm very excited about the release of the game. I'm definitely gonna play on release now, which I wasn't even planning on before I got access to this. I'm just really hoping they sort out some of these issues by then.